皆様ごきげんよう、高松菜奈です。私はイギリスのヤングシティズンズという団体にやってまいりました。こちらは30年ほどイギリスの若者の政治参加を促す市民教育をやってきました。本日はどうやってイギリスの若者の政治参加を促してきているのかなど、代表の方にお話をお伺いしたいと思います。
So Young Citizens is a charity that's been around for over 30 years. So one of the unique things that you learn in the UK is something called fundamental British values. So I've recently spoken to the House of Lords, is finding ways for companies to be putting money into our work so we can give back to the community. I think sometimes when you say citizenship, when you say activism, people think you're tearing stuff down, you're destroying things.
Message for Japanese young people.
My message to Japanese young people across Japan. My name's Ashley Hodges. I'm the chief executive of a charity called Young Citizens here in the UK. I've been chief executive since last year, and I have over a 10-year experience working in education across the UK. So Young Citizens is a charity that's been around for over 30 years. We were founded in 1989 by Lord Phillips. We were created so that young people could understand their rights and responsibilities and understand how the law applies to them. And since then, we've really become one of the largest providers of citizenship education across the country, making sure not only do they understand their rights and responsibilities, but the democratic system, making sure teachers have access to really great citizenship resources. And we have a series of flagship programs, such as our mock trials competition, our Make a Difference challenge, and that's a social action challenge. We also have resources that we do with corporate partners around things like the climate crisis and plastics pollution to AI and ethics and digital citizenship as well. So everything from media literacy to be a prepared citizen to being well aware of how our democratic process works so they can be a young active citizen.
What are the current challenges in citizenship education?
One of the challenges in citizenship education is making sure schools have time to deliver it.
Has citizenship education public institutional background, mainly financial?
So citizenship education, it is expected to be taught in state schools. So it's funded in the sense that it's a part of the state curriculum. However, different schools teach it well, and the bar for that's quite low. So there's not a lot of money going into citizenship education. It's probably one of the more underfunded curriculum subjects.
What kind of lessons are essential in citizenship education? What are some examples of the emphasis?
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the types of lessons you learn in citizenship in the UK, you will learn about the law and the justice system. So you learn about what are your rights, how does the law work, how do courts work. You also learn about democracy and your representatives, for example, so members of parliament, as we call MPs. You also, though, do get to learn about how citizenship structures more broadly, democracy impact policy making. But how much you learn depends on which school you go to sometimes. So one of the unique things that you learn in the UK is something called fundamental British values. The education department introduced this some time ago, but there are set values that you learn. So the importance of the rule of law, the importance of democracy, tolerance, freedom of religious belief. And these are really literally the fundamental values that you teach. And that's quite specific to the UK.
What are some of the things young students are aware of to help young people have the power to challenge society and experience success? In Japan, few young people think they can change society.
There's a very important tradition of public power protest in the UK, and the fact that we believe that our public institutions belong to the public. So, for example, Our social action program is all about making a difference in your community and choosing a project as a young person and giving them an experience of what it's like to go out and change an issue in their community. Mock trials is about learning about the legal system, and a lot of what young people need is an experience of actually practicing citizenship to build those skills. So we make sure they get a chance to practice the skills of citizenship, not just learn the knowledge of it. So they have that as a citizenship habit, as a part of going out and challenging institutions, holding power to account where they need to.
How do you measure the outcomes of citizenship education?
So impact measurement, and how do we know our programs are working? I think this is the hard part about citizenship education, where whilst we can test knowledge, so we do ask students after they take part in a program, for example, do you understand human rights law better? Where in terms of how do we measure confidence, we ask them how confident they would feel about being asked about that law or acting. But that is an area that overall needs more work, I would say, across education, is how do you see that they are going to have the confidence and self-efficacy to do that well. What the literature says, though, to note, is one of the biggest indicators of somebody having the ability to take action is having given them an experience to have taken action. So if you want to build a habit, voting, you want to actually help them do that once. If you help someone do something once, they're more likely to do it. So it's one way that we know from the literature that if we at least give them an opportunity to try it, we're more likely to get them to be active. And that's, but in terms of measuring in future, it's a very hard question.
What skills are essential for teachers?
In terms of skills that are really critical for teaching citizenship, you do need the ability both to talk through institutional knowledge and why those institutions work a certain way. But what we find, what's a big barrier to teaching citizenship well, is the confidence to talk about controversial issues. So those socioeconomic issues that are really complex, they can become political. Students can have very different viewpoints. Making sure teachers have the tools to navigate difficult conversations with their students, I would say, is one of the biggest things that you need to have, and that can be a barrier.
How do you guarantee political neutrality? In Japan, only about 30% of the teachers in Japan are involved in specific political events because there are penalties for teachers and the problems they may face in a local or national parliament.
Political impartiality is a really important part of citizenship education, and in the UK, the way that we do that is we do have rules from the Department of Education on how to stick to political impartiality. Those have recently been refreshed. There was actually a controversy in the UK last month about political impartiality. And it's really important to both have teacher training and also the Department of Education guidance on it, so they don't get it wrong.
You developed a 10-year plan in 2017 to highlight the importance of citizenship education. Why are you running a further campaign like this?
Yes, so our charity, in addition to making sure we offer citizenship education, we do believe it's important to represent to the government that and advocate to the government its role and how important it is to young people. So if we don't do that, the problem will be that it won't be on the curriculum. The government could cut it from the curriculum, and then we'd have even fewer young people learning about citizenship. So one of our strategic goals is to make sure that we advocate for the value of citizenship education more broadly, and that we also show them the impact it can have, so it stays on the curriculum and more young people benefit.
What kind of success campaign?
One of the things that I would say shows that we've been successful is not just protecting it on the curriculum, but we would like to see more consistency across different types of schools offering it. So I've recently spoken to the House of Lords as a part of the report on civic engagement and citizenship. and got to speak to the government about why it's really important to make sure that we empower schools to offer at least quality and consistent citizenship. So I think we've been successful when you can ask any young person in this country what their rights are, do they know how to vote, and they can all say yes. Right now, some say yes, some probably don't know. So in terms of success, I think that's what we need to strive towards. There was a citizenship review in 2018 in the UK, and that's when our initial review and our evidence that we put forward around the value our education was providing was one of the reasons why it wasn't cut from the curriculum. So it was going to be cut down even further, and it was reduced. But so it's not the resounding success we hoped for in increasing time, but we did in 2018, and then most recently we've made the case for why it shouldn't be cut out of schools as a state requirement. So I would say that's been one of our big successes.
What is your final goal? What do you want to achieve?
I would say the goal of young citizens is that we have active participants in all parts of society. That shouldn't just be voting. It should happen in terms of being able to challenge institutions, housing, what's happening with policy. So in terms of when we've been successful is seeing more young people, taking part in our institutions as future leaders, as running for parliament. Voting's one tool, but I think it's so important that we show them the other places that their voices can be heard and that they're actively participating.
How do you maintain the financial sustainability of the organization?
So our charity is funded in a few different ways. We're very lucky to have trusts and foundations, so grant givers that give us money to sustain our programs because that's how we make them free to schools. We also have corporate companies who give money to us to run these programs, and we get their employees to go into schools to deliver some of the programs. And there is some payment from schools, but it's small payments, subsidized payments, to help us create income to run all of our programs. So one of the ways, so we do have donations that come from individuals, or we have grants which are given by foundations. But I would say corporate income is very important because companies need to be giving back to communities. And most companies, so Nomura, for example, will have corporate citizenship goals. They'll have, the fact that they're supposed to be investing in young people. So one of the ways that we've increased our income towards these activities is finding ways for companies to be putting money into our work so we can give back to the community. So a lot of law firms, for example, fund the work we do on legal education around rights and responsibilities, and that's really helped our income. Most corporations have global citizenship goals, or they have the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals is education. So their motivation sometimes is the fact that their shareholders hold them to account to do that. The other reason why is most corporates that we work with, they recognize by virtue of being in this community and being in our country that they should be doing something for the young people and the people around them. So they tend to have charity policies that they need to be doing something, and we make the argument why we're a really good thing to do. If that makes sense.
Are there any educational systems, culture, or institutional, including citizenship education, that you would like to see introduced in Japan?
I think that teaching citizenship and teaching voting, it's not just about holding power to account in the sense of changing things. It's also about respecting those institutions. Good citizenship does both. You want your institutions to represent your people. You need to give them the power to shape it, but you can do that in a way that also respects the past and it respects institutions. I think sometimes when you say citizenship, when you say activism, people think you're tearing stuff down, you're destroying things, but actually great citizenship is about letting people shape it while still valuing the role of institutions properly within society. If Japan doesn't have that, or people are scared of it, I think that's something to think about, maybe.
Thank you. How do you distance from politics, and what kind of lobbying organization do to get tax money? It is difficult to criticize the government when the organization gets tax money in Japan. But what are organizations doing about it?
So how do we stay apolitical? So, I mean, we believe that you can comment on a variety of politics as long as you don't show favoritism. And, you know, you do have to be able to be a friendly critique to the government, but only as long as you make sure you do that fairly to everyone. So you can't pick one party, the Conservatives or the Labour or the Liberal Democrats. So I think as long as you're doing it fairly across, that's how we do it. I think it's always a difficult question if you're receiving government funding and they might take away your funding. You have to make a decision to find your money elsewhere sometimes if that's not a good fit for what you're trying to achieve.
Thank you. What do you consider to be particularly important when creating teaching materials for children at the secondary school level?
We think about two things. One is how it can be interactive and build skills. It's a chance to test critical thinking, get them to interact with the material. So it brings it to life. The other side is making it relevant. So recently we did a mock trials debate, and it was about social media. Everyone knows what social media is. So when you talk about the law, you don't always have to talk about the Constitution. You can talk about how it actually impacts their life. So interactive and then topical, I would say, are two important things to do.
Thank you. Successes and failures of citizenship education in the UK in the global context.
Controversial issue with it is we talk about British values, and some people might argue that fundamental British values are too limiting. And is that too, are they just maybe human values? Do they have to call them British values? So that's a big controversy within education in the UK is what's the role of British values? Could we maybe look at that slightly differently so people are thinking globally and not just about the UK?
Please message for Japanese young people.
My message to Japanese young people across Japan is the fact that you should feel really proud of being active and participating in your community because you are your community. It can be difficult. Everyone is going to have different political views, but there's nothing worse than opting out because if you don't show up, you won't be represented. So the most important thing is at least showing up and just start there. Whether or not you want to run for office, whether or not you want to be political or be an activist, you can decide that, but you should try to show up and be active, and that will mean that your future institutions and your society will reflect you.
最後までご覧いただきありがとうございました。ぜひチャンネル登録、高評価お願いいたします。それではまたごきげんよう。